Firstly, it's really important to recognize that yesterday is not tomorrow, right? When you think about something that happened in the past, you revivify the emotions associated with it. So whether you fail at a business or, fail at a marriage or a relationship, if you focus on the failure, you get to re-experience the emotional states. In that moment, I realized that it was all about who you choose to become along the journey.
Hi, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for asking. Welcome to Peak Performance Perspective, where we help entrepreneurs master health, wealth, and relationships. I must start out by asking, what does peak performance mean to you?
Peak performance means giving the best you can with the knowledge you have, seeking out the best teachers in the world, making sure that you apply the strategies of success to what you're doing, knowing you're going to make mistakes, and then you fail your way forward to success. But hopefully, with each iteration of your attempts, you get better and better and better and better. And when I was in my 20s, I studied a martial art and I ended up getting a black belt in martial arts. And so the how you get there, I mean, really only in the 10 years that I was studying that style, only 2% of people got to a black belt. And in that 10 years, the people that got to getting a black belt were the ones that never quit. But it's the ones also that took the adversity, took the pain they were able to deal with suffering, and to keep moving forward and learning and moving forward. I had an interesting experience when I was just before I was about to sit my black belt grading. So I've been training every day for about 3 months, 2 to 3 hours a day. I was eating fish and rice and vegetables for 3 months. I was substantially thinner than what I am now. And because I was incredibly focused on that one thing. And just before my black belt grading, so the lower grades had to do their gradings first, and then the people going for their black belt did it afterwards. And so we had about half an hour. There were six of us going for our black belt grading. We had about half an hour. All we could do was nothing. And so I sat down, and what everyone instinctively did was we just went into a meditative state. And I was sitting there, and I felt like my mind had a beautiful crystal clear mountain stream going through it, but my body felt like it was a volcano just straining at the leash. And having to hold those two things at the same time and to be able to, that's what I needed to do to be able to perform and to, well, not get my head knocked off my shoulders. And in that moment, I was thinking about what's the point? Like, what's the point of pushing yourself to get to the level of peak performance that you can in order to get a black belt? And because it's not about a piece of black cotton. Like a black belt is just a piece of black cotton. It costs $20. Anyone can go and buy one, but they don't give them away for free. You can buy for $20, but they're not free. And so, but what's the whole point? And the whole point, I realized at that point, the whole point isn't the black cotton. It's about who you're choosing to become in the pursuit of the goals that you're seeking to achieve. In that moment, I realized that it was all about who you choose to become along the journey. So peak performance, whether it's getting a black belt, whether it's having a great relationship, whether it's building a great business, whether it's is about choosing who you choose to become. And if you have a look at our society, where 70 or 80% of our society are overweight or obese, a lot of people don't focus on who they're choosing to become. They just get stuck in the moment of and stuck in their stress and their emotional states rather than focusing on who am I choosing to become. And if you think about that, then it's that growth process that allows you to get peak performance.
So many good nuggets there. I want to start out by asking a bit about mistakes. You said we all make mistakes. We have to accept that, and then we have to be able to learn from them and move on. For
Yep,
some of us, that's easier to do than others because
indeed.
some of us dwell over our mistakes a long time, and that almost becomes an extension of our identity, and that prohibits us from trying again or
That's
trying
right.
as vigorously. Why does that happen? And if somebody's listening to this and they struggle with this, what can they do to get past this?
Well, firstly, it's really important to recognize that yesterday is not tomorrow, right? Like, a lot of the work I do is in relationships, and a lot of people come to me and they go, 2 years ago, my partner did this, or 5 years ago, my partner did that. And when you think about something that happened in the past, you revivify the emotions associated with it. So whether you fail at a business or, you fail at a martial arts technique or fail at a marriage or a relationship, if you focus on the failure, you get to re-experience the emotional states. The people who can focus on the future, on the lessons that they can learn from their failures, are the ones that move forward. I do a lot of work with people with depression and anxiety, and often people who experience depression, they're focusing on the past. That if you put them in a hypnotic state and temporarily take away their past, they can't experience the depression. And in a hypnotic state, I can literally just go, let's take away your past for a moment. And they go like, oh, my brain's quiet and I feel good. Like, oh, and when you say, can you have the depression right now? They're like, I can't experience that right now. Can you please give me my past back? So sure, I can give you a past back, but if you give you the past back free from the negative emotions and focus on the lessons, then you actually can use the past as a storehouse of information, a storehouse of lessons, and you can drive your relationship and your life forward. People get stuck in the emotions of the past and they loop and they go round and round and round and round, and that's when people can't crack out of it.
There is so much good and inadequate information about hypnosis in our culture. Some people have tried it and they love it. Some people have never tried it, but they have an opinion about it. Can you explain to our viewers what hypnosis really is and why it's so effective in helping people with depression and helping them move on?
Okay, sure. So hypnosis is a state of selectively focused attention, and it's like a midway point between waking consciousness and sleep. When you're awake, your body's awake and your mind is awake. When you're asleep, your conscious mind is asleep and your body's asleep. But when you're in a state of hypnotic trance, it feels like your body's asleep, but your mind is still awake. Now, inside that state of hypnotic trance, the unconscious mind is perfectly capable of changing most things about your life. There's a limited number of things that the hypnosis can't change, right? The desire to eat, the desire to sleep, the desire to drink, the desire to go to the toilet, fear of heights and fear of loud noises. Everything else is up for grabs. Everything. So, and any repeating pattern behavior or emotional states is changeable with hypnosis. Now, a lot of people are fearful of hypnosis because they have the illusion of self-control, or they want to maintain the illusion of control. So rather than have a life that they want, they think that if they do hypnosis, they will lose control. Now, that's actually not true, because inside the state of hypnotic trance, you can exit the trance at any time you want to. Like I say to clients all the time, like when my clients emerge from trance, they go, yeah, I knew I was awake. I wasn't asleep. It's not sleep. I was awake. I could hear your voice. I knew what you were saying, and it just felt really good, right? They had control at all times. And a lot of people avoid hypnosis because they want to avoid that feeling, that sense of lack of control. And so a lot of people would prefer to have control than be happy. So hypnosis works really well in changing any repeating pattern of behavior. This is why it works really well with smoking. It works really well with weight loss. It really works really well with a whole heap of things. You know, the unconscious, and the reason why it's so effective is this. The unconscious mind has a couple of prime directives. So you've got your conscious mind and the unconscious. The conscious is the part that's listening to me right now, and the unconscious mind is everything else. The unconscious mind has got a number of prime directives. The first one is infinite replication of past behavior. Infinite replication. So if you've done something 10 to 14 times, the unconscious mind thinks you should do it forever. Right, you've got a car, Mark. How many times? So you go to a gas station and fill up your car with gas?
Yeah.
How many times have you done that?
Thousands of times.
Thousands of times. How many times have you had to relearn how to do that?
Not once, just
You,
one time. That was it.
you learn it once, and it's infinite replication of that behavior. Well, it doesn't matter what behavior you do, the unconscious mind is trying to do that forever with everything you do. But the problem is people don't realize that infinite replication of past behavior has incredibly negative consequences if you only need to do something 10 to 14 times. Now, that's one of the prime directives of the unconscious mind. The next one is to keep you safe. So the unconscious mind is continually context matching. It's searching for everything in the nearby environment, going, am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? Is there something in my environment that might look like something that might be unsafe? All right. And when it finds something, it gives a big dump of the emotions to the conscious mind. Like here's a massive, massive dump of emotions. This is how phobias are formed. This is how panic attacks are formed. This is how anxiety is formed. All right. So what's happening in the nearby environment that might sort of roughly look like a threat? Now, inside the state of hypnotic trance, I can say to the elephant, I could say to the unconscious mind, this is not a threat. Like you can let go of that original experience. Or in the context of jumping in a car or going on a plane or in whatever context they might have the problem, they can experience a different thing. So inside the state of hypnotic trance, the elephant's perfectly capable of changing any repeating pattern of behavior. It's remarkable what it can do. Like I once had a client, she smoked 50 cones of marijuana a day, 50 a day, and she'd done so 30 years. Right? How she was dead, I don't know. But she was also a really good hypnotic subject. And so I did one hypnotic trance with her in 26 minutes. She went from nothing to dead stop. And she never had any withdrawal symptoms. None. Now, if you talk to a withdrawal expert, they would say they should take about 12 months to wean them off them because there's a physiological dependency. I just told her unconscious mind inside the state of trance, you won't have any withdrawal symptoms, and went, okay, fine. Right? So the hypnosis is tremendously powerful and it can produce incredible change. But a lot of people avoid it because they either want the control or they're actually really attached to their problems. Like there's a saying that people will maintain their problems only as long as the desire for the problem is greater than the desire for the solution. When the desire for the solution is greater than the desire for the problem, they'll to seek the solution out. But a lot of people have to see the problem as being a problem before they reach for the solution.
What inspired your shift from engineering to relationship counseling and hypnotherapy? Was there a
Well,
particular moment or realization?
yeah, I just realized I really wanted to work with people. And look, I was always fascinated in relationships. Like even when I was in my early 20s, I was reading relationship books and I wanted to figure out how the whole thing worked. And mostly to have a good one, but I also wanted to, like, I was just really curious. And, I worked in the mining industry as an engineer, was a machinery data analyst. I got really good at that. I would go to an industrial plant, take a whole heap of readings on a whole heap of machines and produce a 50 or 60 page report and had to be 95% accurate. And people were making calls on my maintenance calls on what I say that potentially could cost them millions of dollars if I got it wrong. So I got actually pretty good at that. But it was emotionally unsatisfying. And also, I wanted to do work that had longevity, as in had a legacy. Like, I'm going to be dead one day. You are too. And given what's going on in my personal life, that's incredibly apparent. And so it's really important to be able to go, well, if eventually going to die, what's my legacy? And I didn't want to have it written on my tombstone. He wrote really good vibration reports. Like I wanted to do work with people. Also, when I started doing the work, I actually found out I'm actually pretty going to be good at it. And so because I approached the whole work of relationships from an engineer's perspective, and in engineering school, in the first year of engineering school, you learn about 8 different sciences. And so you do the statics, mechanics, materials, mathematics, physics, chemistry, electronics, and environmental. And so you learn about 8 different sciences. And when they start with that, what they do is they go, here's the system, these are the rules of the system, these are the common problems, these are common solutions. And then if you understand all that stuff, whatever problem comes up, you can apply the rules of the system. So I started looking at relationships from that perspective. So how does the system work? What are the common problems? What are the common solutions to common problems? And to see it from a perspective of what is the most effective. Because in the engineering world, what actually people are really interested in is like they're not interested in bullshit. Can I say that? They're interested in what works and what's effective. Because the laws of physics don't care about your feelings, right? The law of physics just are. So I noticed, so when I started working with people with relationships, I got really, really interested in what works because it's clear that every couple always come to me were doing something that didn't work. And so also I did a heap of training in relationship counseling. I did a heap of training in counseling. Did a heap of training in hypnosis and in NLP. And also I was looking at it from the perspective of a hypnotist. And the perspective of a hypnotist is, well, how do you shift their mindset and what's the problem, how they're seeing the world and how can you shift the dynamic of the world. Also, I've done a heap of survival training. So for a period of time, a few years, I hung out with a guy that used to be the lead survival instructor for the Australian Special Forces and really, really interesting guy, really great guy, but just make sure you don't upset him. And so his entire thing was the way to improve and learn is to get out of your comfort zone. And no change comes by getting out of your comfort zone. You're a bodybuilder, right? And so, muscle growth comes from pushing your muscles, and your muscles create strength in order to deal with the extra demand in load. And then with the appropriate supplements, and you can create increasing strength and increasing muscle. You don't get that increase in strength and increase in muscle growth from not challenging the muscle and not stretching it. Well, I noticed when couples came to me when I was working with couples, I say to people online when they call me on the phone, it's like, I don't take sides in when dealing with a couple. It's my intention to make you both equally uncomfortable because comfort and you won't get change in the comfort zone. Like growth and comfort are antithetical to each other, and so they laugh, and then halfway through the first session they realize that I wasn't joking because I'm like, oh, your problem is that, and your problem is that, and you need to do this and you need to do that, and sometimes I hear these sharp intakes of breath where they're like, but like change never happens in the comfort zone. You got to get outside your comfort zone. And a lot of people's comfort zones people can get into a comfort zone in their relationship that makes them profoundly miserable. But because they've created it, they can't solve it. As Einstein once said, you can't solve a problem with the mind that created it. So you have to get a different perspective to be able to change
So, how do you go about helping your clients get out of the comfort zone while feeling safe? Because part of the reason why we want to stay in the comfort zone is because it's safe there.
Yes. Okay. Firstly, it's important for them to understand the overall system of relationship. And if you're also it's important for them to understand that, well, I've done this. I see about 300 couples a year, right? Like I'll be very surprised in the state of Queensland that I live in that anyone sees anywhere near the amount of people that I see. Like, I do about 900 sessions a year. So, like whatever patterns people come to me with, I've probably seen it 5 times that week. So, very rarely do people come to that surprises me. Although sometimes if you go, "Oh, I've never heard that before." So in terms of keeping them safe, it's important for them to recognise that their problems aren't unique and that there are certain solutions going forward. When I tell them that I've probably dealt with I've assisted people when whatever dealt with before, and this is a solution path that I've tried a stack of times before, they do actually relax a little bit. But also, I point them towards a solution path. Like, as part of my survival training, I did tracking, and tracking is finding lost people in the bush, or combat tracking is hunting people. And so, but finding someone who's lost in the bush, people who are lost in a wilderness or a remote environment, one of the things they do, the primary thing that people do is they try and find something that's familiar. They're trying to find something that looks like safety. So for little kids lost in the bush, they're normally found within 1.5 kilometers of the last known point. They'll find somewhere dark and somewhere where they can crawl under something, and they typically stop there. That's what little kids do. Adults are normally found within 7 kilometers of their last known position, and they'll normally try and find some kind of man-made object, either a fence or a power line or a barn or some kind of structure. And when they find that, they'll stop because that represents safety. There's something that's familiar. So when people are in a relationship crisis, they will try and find something that's familiar, try and find something where they can hang on to that can point them in the way home. So whenever I work with couples, I'm like, okay, this is the way home. This is how you can get to where you want to get to, right? But this is a path you need to take. When they understand that, they relax because they realize that they can see a solution to their problem. A lot of people turn up, they can't see solutions, they feel completely lost, particularly kids in their 20s who might, their first big relationship, they're in the middle of their first relationship crisis and never had the experience before. And it's like, okay, I've dealt with this 100 times this year, so let's work the problem. So I can see them going, oh, that's actually good. Does that answer your question?
You wrote a book, Thriving in the Flux, where you discussed the 9 timeless principles. How
Yes.
can couples apply them in their daily lives?
Okay, that's a good question. So couples can apply them. Well, firstly, I made the book really, really simple. It's written in plain language. Like my first draft of the book was about 4 times as long, and I realized most people probably won't read something that's 250 pages and 120,000 words. So I cut it down to 30,000 words, and it's much more readable. So I talk about the habits of connection and the habits of desire. The biggest thing that people don't understand in relationships, or the thing that people don't really get, is that desire is not a natural function. It's not normal to desire someone over a long period of time. And people want to feel desired, just sexually, but they want someone to want to be with them. And desire is not a natural function. Over time, desire slowly decreases. But because most people over time stop doing the behaviors that are desirable. There are certain things that are inherently desirable in human beings, certain behaviors. And I get couples back working on those habits that are inherently desirable, and their relationships change like that because I get them doing the habits that are inherently desirable. And so, but I talk about it has got to be a habit. And it's really easy to lose and to stop doing the habits of desire and habits of connection. And these days, everybody's got one of these things that takes them out of connection. And there's a whole heap of pressures in our society that mean that people are inherently less connected and they're a lot more distracted than they've ever been before. One of the questions I ask people is, pretend it's 1985 and there's one phone in the house connected to the wall via a copper cable. How would you have your relationship then? Now, for kids in their 20s, they look at you like you're talking Sanskrit. They're like, what, there was a time before there were phones and the internet? It's like, yeah, there was, But the divorce rate was 20% less than what it is now. 20%. And so the things that people used to do developed connection, people have stopped doing because of technology and pressure and, everything's moving heap faster. And I say, well, it's probably a good idea to stop doing those things and to go back to doing the habits of connection. Yeah. I once had these clients, like he was a project manager and she was a senior worker in a government department. And I was talking about this and they went, oh, it's like, well, turn off your phones. I said, how much time do you spend at night with your face in front of your phone? They went about 2 hours each. So you can have 2 hours a night for your relationship. So turn off your phones. And so they did that. And then they went, hang on, what we used to do when we were dating, they used to read books to each other. So they'd buy a book, give each other the book, and each night they would read 20 minutes to half an hour reading a book to each other, right? So after the session with me, they went to a bookstore, each got a book they wanted their partner to read. They swapped books. And at night, instead of doom scrolling on Instagram going, they started reading books with each other for 20 minutes to half an hour. And they said, we fell in love again, just from reading books to each other, all right? And so, just simple things like that. And to make that a habit can dramatically change relationship satisfaction.
There are obviously unique things that people do that their partner likes in them, which makes them desirable. But when it comes to some general things, general rules of desirability, in your experience, having worked with so many couples, what are the most common things that are there that makes someone feel wanted?
Okay. Well, the first one is the capacity to regulate their own emotional states. Once I had this got that's particularly important for women. Women need to know their partner's going to not lose his shit and get really angry and hurt her. Yeah, because women tend to be small in size. And so, but men also seek emotional stability in their partner. So emotional self-regulation is the primary one. But we don't want to talk about that in our society. We live in a society where the primacy of feelings is everything. It's like, oh, I feel blah, 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 therefore I can do blah, 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 blah. Well, when what I've noticed in working with a whole heap of couples, when people regulate their own emotional states, that's inherently desirable. Yeah. I once had this guy, he grew up in a really, really, really rough part of London, and father wasn't there. He basically said whenever he went to school, he was wondering whether or not he was going to get stabbed on the way to school or on the way back. Right. So pretty rough part of London. Gets to Australia, works like crazy. And then because he was really, really stressed, he was running multiple businesses because he was stressed. And whenever his partner said something that ticked him off, he just fully loses and just get really, really angry. And so I said, well, you need to regulate your own emotional states. And so he started doing that. And he realized the first time he caught himself getting angry and stopped it, he realized whenever he got angry, he became his father. And he went, so he stopped. And all of a sudden, instead of looking at running away from him, she was like, that's really hot. Every time he regulates his emotional states and doesn't lose it, that's really hot. And I've lost track of the amount of people that go, when my partner's much better regulated, I feel a lot better, right? So that's the first one, emotional self-regulation. Next one is presence, like being able to give your partner your undivided attention. But once again, problem is we have these things, yeah? And mobile phones take people out of presence, whether they're notifications or phone calls or you name it, emails, and people very rarely are present with their partner. But presence is really, really important in a relationship. And so having a partner give you your presence is essential. And I say to clients all the time, particularly young parents, like, because here's the thing, particularly parents of young children, I said, what happens to a 3-year-old if you don't give it time and attention, right? A 2 or 3-year-old human being. They go, oh, they do naughty and they do something and they lose their shit and they throw a tantrum or they do something naughty. And okay, so as far as a 3-year-old, in the absence of positive attention, a 3-year-old will seek out negative attention because negative attention is better than indifference. And they go, oh yeah, that's right. I said, well, adults are 3-year-olds grown big, right? So a lot of adults, in the absence of, because their partner's not giving them their time and attention, because they're doing this. This is what indifference looks like these days. Like doom scrolling on a mobile phone says, I'm indifferent to you. And the absence of positive attention, people seek out negative attention because it's better than indifference. Well, if you give your positive attention to your partner, that is a way of massively improving your relationship. Attention is a currency of relationship. So bring your presence, regulating your emotional states. Next thing is acting with integrity. Integrity is inherently desirable. Once again, particularly important for women, right? Integrity has been the measure of men for thousands of years. The greeting amongst Roman legionaries, which was the most successful organization on the planet for 800 years, was fortudinously virtuous. Now, virtuous is roughly translated as integrity. So they greeted each other as with saying strength and integrity, and they will fight and die next to the man next to them because of integrity. And every special forces in the world has integrity tests as part of their selection criteria. They'll give candidates a task, and they think they're being unobserved, but they are actually being observed, and to carry out the task, and or if they cheat on task when they think nobody's watching, they're immediately removed the selection because they have to have integrity. So, but integrity is really, really important. It's not something we talk about much these days because the primacy of feelings overrides everything else in our culture. But it's really important in relationships. So often, if people cheat, if they have a breach of trust, as in they contact someone on their phone or have an emotional affair, the thing people come back to is like, how can I trust them because they don't have integrity. And whilst it might not be popular in our culture to talk about integrity, people know when they don't have it in a relationship. So that's three things to start with: integrity, presence, and emotional self-regulation. That's a good start.
For singles who are seeking healthy relationships, would you say that the three principles apply, or is there any other advice you would give them when looking and when they're selecting a better partner?
Excellent question. 90% of relationship success is picking the right person. Yeah. Actually, that's no, probably 80%. But nevertheless, there are a number of things that are really important for people to focus on in order to select a good partner. Well, the first one is, well, do they have a lifelong exercise habit? Right? Are they committed to exercise? Because you've got to remember the foundation of emotional self-regulation is good exercise pattern, right? If somebody is, from 40, 50 kilos overweight and says, oh yeah, I went to the gym last year, but I think I've gone to the gym once a year. Once a year is enough for me. All right. Yeah, that's probably not a good thing, right? So I wouldn't say you need to look for someone who has a regular exercise habit, not because they're going to be fitter and healthier, although that's important, but because they're going to be better able to regulate the emotional states. So that's the first one. Next one, it's really important for them to be able to work together as a team, right? Because good relationships are a team sport, right? If one person's like, I always get my way and nobody gets in front of, if someone says that on a date, just, check please. You look like your relationships are a team sport, and all good relationships live in the middle ground where there's your needs and there's your needs and there's what's in the middle, and that's where you need to be, right? There's your needs and her needs or his needs, and then it's what's in the middle. And you need to focus on seeking the middle ground at all times. If one person says, I always get my way, or they, aren't a good team player, well, you should probably avoid getting a relationship with them. The next thing is, in terms of selection criteria, is what's their relationship with addiction, right? Because I work with a lot of couples and they could have a good relationship, but one person has an addiction that blows it up, whether it's an alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, drug addiction, porn addiction, marijuana addiction, sex addiction. A lot of people use addiction to regulate their emotions because they don't have the capacity to deal with their emotional states outside of the addiction. So you need to pay close attention to someone's, whether they have an addiction or not. Yeah. Now, you might meet someone who has the same addiction. Like I once had this couple, they were like, it was funny. They came to me like, well, we got a problem we got a problem with alcohol. I mean, okay, so what happened? So every night, one of us goes to a bottle shop on the way home. We get 2 bottles of wine. We each drink a bottle of wine a night. And when one person gets to the end of the bottle, we have pick a fight. So the person that gets the end of the bottle first picks a fight. So we're fighting with each other every night. But because we're drunk every night, we're having really, really horrible fights. And I said, okay, it's simple. Stop going to the bottle shop. And they went, well, we don't know how to do that. So I did some hypnosis with the two of them. So instead of drinking a full bottle, they'd have 1, 2 glasses and stop. And then a fortnight later, the dude comes back going, holy shit, Michael Brook, you're a magician. I said, why is that? And said, we stopped fighting. And I went, oh, have you stopped drinking? Yeah, we stopped drinking too. And so sometimes addictions can blow up the relationship, but sometimes if you've got someone with the same addiction, well, it can actually, but you've got to be really careful about what it does. So nevertheless, so you asked a question about singles. So exercise, can they work together as a team? Do they have an issue with addiction? Next thing is how well do they deal with conflict? Because conflict is a part of every relationship. Conflict is a part of your relationship where people's sense of self and boundaries are negotiated. And every relationship is a continuous negotiation. And because every relationship is a continuous negotiation, your sense of self and boundaries will continually need to be negotiated. And therefore, conflict is a part of every relationship, even really good ones. In the human mind, there are 2 forces, that are ever present. The first thing is the desire for a sense of personal autonomy, a sense of yourself. And the next thing is the desire for you to be fully smushed in and connect with someone you love. And that desire to be fully smushed in or separate is the tension that people carry between their personal life and their relationship. Now, over a period of time, people's lives and their sense of self get smushed in with each other. And when they get smushed in with each other, they become incredibly reactive and become triggered by what their partner does. And when people come in, they're really highly reactive and get really triggered all the time. I know their sense of selves are smushed in with each other. And so the way to, and then how they deal with conflict comes into play. because they're getting into conflict all the time. And a lot of couples I work with, they just have really bad ways of dealing with conflict, or they have different conflict styles. There's normally one person in a relationship that wants the conflict, really conflict okay. There's normally one person in a relationship that's really conflict averse. The person that's conflict okay wants it fixed right away. The person that's conflict averse wants to avoid it so they can get a relationship get back on track. But if that's what you learned from your parents, if you get in a relationship with them, then the conflict you experience, then the necessary conflict in a relationship will always blow up badly. And so often, about a third of my clients' issues isn't the fact they don't love each other or they can't communicate. The issue is have really dysfunctional ways of dealing with conflict. So if you're looking to date someone, you'd ask the question, how well do they deal with conflict? Do they deal with conflict all the time? Hint, are they a lawyer? Yeah. Like,
You have accomplished impressive physical feats in your life, solo survival challenges. We talked about earning a black belt. And obviously, those disciplines have informed upon, what we touched upon earlier, the willingness to fight it, the willingness to move past our mistakes and look at obstacles as really opportunities. How do you think that has also made you the type of counselor you are when it comes to specifically viewing relationships a certain way and healing them?
okay, so that's a really good question. So the first thing is I'm not afraid to ask the uncomfortable questions. And like one of the questions I once had this guy come in and he was off his nut on meth. He was like, so literally the whole time swearing like he used to be in the army, so he was swearing like a soldier, like F this, F that, I don't want him here. And so he was shaking like doing, and I went, I've never seen a human being behave like that. Like, it was like, and about 40 minutes in the session, I looked at him and went, if you're in a relationship with yourself, how long would you stay for? And he went, I'm out of here, and leaves. And he comes back 2 weeks later and he goes, and he was clean, hadn't had any drugs, and they sat there, looked at each other, held hands, and they said, we're gonna beat this. And I realized that question had tremendous value. So I often ask that question to clients. If you're in a relationship with yourself, the way you're behaving towards your relationship partner, how long would you stay for? How long would you be with yourself for? Now, a lot of people find that really uncomfortable. A lot of people, I hear this sharp intakes of breath where people go, yeah, I wouldn't stay with myself for a moment because I'm being an asshole or I'm being a bitch, right? I hear that a lot, right? And so, so the first, getting back to I'm prepared to ask those questions, right? And that's why the work I do with couples goes so fast. Because the other thing too is the fundamental thing that I think drives the work I do, the reason I call business rapid, the reason I get rapid change is I go, you work on you and you work on you. So you, at the heart of you're the cause of your behavior. And a lot of people come to me, they sit down and they're like going, and they're literally going, oh, they're the problem, they're the problem, they're the problem, they're the problem, and actually not the problem, right? And so there's a loud noise outside. I need to go and shut a couple of windows, otherwise it'll dominate the audio. So can we just back? Wait a second. So my experience of stepping into discomfort, if you're on a survival challenge, the only person that's responsible, if you're doing a solo survival challenge, the only person responsible for you getting out of it alive is you. Yeah. Now you have backups, and clearly to go into a context like that without communications and a rescue plan is a bad idea. But fundamentally, when you're in the experience, it's down to you. So you got to make sure you procure your shelter, water, food in that sequence. And it's all down to you. And when couples come to me, initially they're like, well, he should be doing this or she should be doing that. And they're going like, and so they're not paying attention they're not focusing on what themselves are, right? And I say this, and I say all the time, the single greatest determinant whether people can adequately deal with the crisis that brings them into my room is whether both people can confront themselves. The confrontation of yourself is the foundation of a relationship change, because people are used to confronting their partner for years and it doesn't work. So through my martial arts, through my survival stuff, it's, the only person that's going to give me a black belt is myself. And that's just by showing up. I had to confront my own weakness, confront my own avoidance, confront my aversion to pain. You've got to keep progressing forward. And so I bring that to the work I do with couples. I go, you work on you and you work on you. You focus on being as desirable as you possibly can. You focus on being desirable as you possibly can. You confront yourself about what you're bringing, and you confront yourself about what you're bringing. And if both people bring their best game, relationships change like that. It happens so fast to make people head spin. They're like, oh, we did not believe how quickly this can happen. But notice it's very different to a lot of the kind of, tell your partner how you feel and all this kind of stuff. And, well, being able to express how you feel is important, but it actually doesn't get the job done, because then it's still referencing your partner and giving your control of your emotional states over to your partner. And the way to move a relationship forward is for them people to take control of their emotional states and bring their best game to their partner. And when they do, and both people do that, that is inherently desirable, and then desire for the relationship skyrockets.
In an ocean of relation coaches where it's the same beaten track over and over again, Michael, you are a breath of fresh air. The fact that you're an engineer, the fact that you have such background in physical sports allows you to have certain superpowers that allows you to look at people and look at situations very differently than most other coaches do. And I think that's where the uniqueness lies. That
Mhm.
while most relationship coaches takes weeks, months, years to diagnose and solve a relationship problem, it takes you less than 4 sessions. So it's been an honor and a pleasure to be able to talk to you and understand your approach towards human relationships and feelings in general. Thank you so much for being on the show. Any last words for audience members?
One of the things yes, in April 2019, I went on a solo survival challenge. And I was dropped on a remote tropical island off the coast of Vanuatu with 6 liters of water on an island with no water source, 2 kilometers from the coast, to survive or die for a week. So in that week, I was going to need about 20 something liters, and I went on an island with 6 liters. Now, in survival world, there's something called the rule of threes. We can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and 3 months without company. So on an island with no water source, shelter was relatively easy, but it's a water thing. So I didn't find water within 72 hours. I was flat dead, right? And there's no one to help. I'd had 9 months in the best planning from the best survival instructor in Australia. And so I had enough, and I had multiple redundancies in my water acquisition system to be able to solve the problem. So I solved the problem. But on that island, I thought about this. We are 3 days away from death at all times. If the tap stopped going, within 48 hours, people will be shooting each other for a case of water. And if you have a look at the New Orleans, it's like Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, that's true, all right? And so we are literally 3 days away from death at all times. And so what I do is sometimes I realized when I got off the island that if you understand that, you bring your best to the moment. You don't fight about meaningless, pointless stuff. And I say to my clients all the time, I've operationalized this as a rule for relationships. If you knew you're going to die in 3 days, how would you be doing your relationship, and do that shit today? Because there's not a moment to waste. You never know when tragedy will overcome you. So if I said differently, if you knew you were going to die in 3 days, about what would you be fighting? And most people go, absolutely nothing. And so it's a really good way of approaching your relationship, but it only works if people do it. But if they do it, they realize the preciousness of the moment. Eternity is now. Some people are going to die today, would give anything for another couple of days with the people they love. So if you're in a relationship with the people you love the hell of them right now, confront yourself, regulate your emotions, and bring your best self to each other, and enjoy the sweetness, the aliveness that comes from a great relationship.
Thank you so much, Michael. It was a pleasure having you on the show. I hope to talk to you soon again.
Likewise, thank you very much for inviting me, Mark.